All right, hi, my name is Jeff with the Big Hairy Dog, and we are talking about crunch reports today, right? That's what I think we're talking about. Anyway, okay. Maybe not. What are we talking about today? Today is yeah, Prism Reports webinar, right? Okay, I'm just making sure I'm on the right page here. All right, well, this is the agenda I put together real quick because the other agenda was pretty rough and I didn't like it. So um, certainly if you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. I'll leave the chat window open on my side, and or turn on your microphone. I don't care. If I don't explain it well enough and you don't understand it, somebody else I'm sure is feeling the same way. So feel free to interject or ask questions as we go. And let's go log into Crunch, right? So here's Crunch. And this is in a little virtual machine that's running on my machine, but I'm just going to sign in here, and I do not have a dashboard set up, so it did not go to the dashboard. We'll get to that in a minute. And there's reports, right? So we'll do a quick navigation to kind of make sure we understand how to get around in here, and then maybe we'll start going down that list. So I can search any report by typing something in this far right-hand box. Right now I've got groups, and I can have as many groups as I want. So I've grouped reports together here in different ways. So as I make them, I try to group them and make little groups of subsets of reports, right? And you can do the same thing totally in Crunch. You can make as many groups as you want. Basically, when you save a report, we'll do that at some point here. You can just make up a group name and it gets added on the fly, right? So organizationally, I can have little groups that put reports in certain places for me to either schedule them and have them be off limits or to find them quickly and run them. I can have multiple owners, so I can have different owners that show me what their reports are, right? So we can, now that means you have multiple report licenses, and different people are making reports, right? So in many cases, it's the system operator who's making the reports, and or myself and the system operator making reports, and then we're sort of doling them out to the different users, right? So typically it's one user that is making them, and then there's the system reports, right? That comes installed with the product. And then again, this is our filter. So if I wanted to find things with the word item in it, it'll just find things with the word item in it, right? If I wanted to find things with any word on hand, right? It'll find everything that has any phrase that I type into this little filter here, end of month, right? So so that's just basic navigation, right? We've got groups, we've got owners, and we got this nice filter. Be careful if you're pitting your two filters against each other, you're not going to get anything. I mean, I think that's basic filtering, but you gotta state the obvious, right? Okay, so if we're just going to run a report, let's start with some basics on how to run a report, right? So what's the difference between running immediate versus running with a filter? Probably I should blow that up. I don't know about you, but it'd be easier to see if I made it a little larger, right? So there's two ways to run a report, and that is to highlight a given report. Let's see what's good here. Let's keep it simple for the moment. So let's go to inventory. Inventory, it's just on hand. There's no date range, right? So if I go in here and say, by store, by department. Okay. If we're going to run this report, I could run this report by clicking this here, run immediate, which if you're old enough, you'd know that that's a fast forward on a cassette deck or a VCR. and that's play, right? And so the arrow that runs with a filter lets me pre-filter it. So if I click this here and I say the gear, by the way, in Crunch, if you see a gear, yeah, you want to click it. You want to open it up. And for those of you guys who just joined, please feel free to throw anything you want in the chat or turn on your mic and ask a question. If you don't understand it, somebody else doesn't understand it. I got the chat box open on the other monitor, so please feel free to clarify or ask questions as needed. So we're going to click this little gear here, and it's going to open up the filter, and then I have all these fields here I can filter by, right? So those are vendor codes in this particular data set I have here. Those are vendor codes. They're not good vendor codes, but they're vendor codes. Well, some of these are pretty good, right? So see, all right. So if I grab a vendor code, I could add that right here before we run the report, and I could say, okay, run the report, and it'll go try and run the report for me, right? So this report is for the on hand, but at the master department level. So only the D, not the DCS, right? That's just the report I picked, right? And then I filtered it to a vendor, right? Is what I did. So this is really just for that one vendor, right? Okay, so what if I ran the report the other way? So if we click back here and I say, okay, this report here, just run this report immediate, boom. Now there's no filtering in this, it's just wide open, right? Now, could I go back and filter it further? Yes, I could go back and open the gear up now, and I could go back and add my filter if I wanted to add my filter again, right? If that makes sense to everybody. Now, when you add a filter, you got to get it in yellow. I don't know if you saw me get it in yellow both times, but you got to make sure you hit that plus sign to get it like in the report, in the runtime experience, right? So everybody's good on that, right? And you click it and it reruns the report again, right? And we're back to where we were a minute ago. All right, and coffee is my friend. All right, so okay, so back to work. So we can run a report with a filter or run immediate, and you can run immediate for a lot of reports, but not all. Like on hand, it's always a safe bet to run on hand by immediate because on hand it's just on hand. But if you're a sales report and you don't have a predefined filter, then you're going to run for all time. So any sales report or any history-based report like receiving or adjustment memos or transfers, right? You're going to want to filter that, or you're going to want to have it predefined with a filter, right? Okay, running with a filter versus column filters, right? So let's run a lower level report. Let's run with items, right? Now I could certainly do the same thing I did a minute ago. I could go in here and I could say, run this with a filter for a vendor. And we're going to grab a vendor code and we're going to click the plus sign to add that to the runtime. We're going to click OK. Now we're going to see items, right? And could I go back and take that filter off? Yes. Now, of course, in Crunch, all columns become a native filter, right? So could I just go here and type in my filter on the top and get the same thing? Yeah, I could. Absolutely could. And if I know my vendors, I know what I'm looking for. So at runtime, because of that indexing, we got that drop-down menu. That's very cool. So I don't actually have to know all the filters by name. I mean, all the vendors by code. I highly recommend you know your vendors, by the way. But in here, I'm not getting a drop-down menu. So I have to know what I'm doing, right? But I could hop around. I could go from one vendor to another vendor, right? I could type in another one if I wanted to type another vendor in, right? So if I'm going to be hopping around a lot, looking at different pieces of data, sometimes it's better off just to run it wide open and then filter on the column headers as needed, right? Because you could call up anything you want here. If I want this 6561 there, I go over here and type 6561 and it gives me that apparently in every store, because we have, this is by store, so it's item by store. So we're showing that one item over and over again for each store, right? In this data set. All right, so everybody's got how to sort of how to filter a crunch report, right? You can filter it at runtime, running it with a filter, or you could just run it wide open and then use the column headers, right? Now, let's go back for a second to the first report. In the first report, this one, right? When we run this wide open, if we want to filter by vendor, we can't because the vendor is not in the report, right? There's no vendor there, it's just departments. So at the SQL level, when I built a report, there's a crunch command. It's crunch specific, or what they call application specific filtering. We added a command that says make vendor a filterable field, right? So in this particular case, if I'm going to filter by vendor, I have to go in here and I have to grab the vendor code, which you see is the application specific filters are always at the bottom. They're below the native fields. So margin is the last column, and then these are all added filters, right? So I would click in here, and then this is indexing. This is what there's a feature in the back end, which we can look at towards the end of the webinar, of how to go and index these, how to make this drop-down menu pop up. And it also searches. So if I type in here, right, it goes and finds things that start with whatever I type, right? And could I have more than one? Yes, I could have as many as I wanted here. And I could say, add those, and it says, yep, and it writes the little sort of SQL in statement or filtering statement, right? So yeah, you could either be filtering using the internal filter or the column headers. And in some cases, it has to be an internal filter because the report is about department codes. It's not about vendor codes. All right, so moving on, right? And no questions so far that I see. So if you do have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat or blurt it out, right? Groupings, what the heck are groupings, right? So a grouping, let's go back to the other one. The other one's a little bit easier to do groupings, right? So if we run this one here, and we take a look at the groupings, because I think it has some groupings, and you can see the groupings right there. Store, department, and DCS, right, are the groupings, right? So basically, when we get to the bottom of the store, we're going to see the other half of this one, right? It's going to give us a subtotal, right? And when we get to the bottom of the master department, it's going to give us a subtotal, and the same with the bottom of the DCS. Although this data is not a good example of DCS, that this particular data set has very simple department codes. They didn't break down accessories, and they should have, but let's not go there, right? So if I click my little gear here and I open up the little gear, I can see it right here. This is where my groupings are right here, right? So if I were to take these out and I wanted to group this by, like say, by department or even DCS, and then by store, I could change the groupings here. I could change them in a different order, and I could also, I could take off these subtotals if I want to, and I could say what I want to do here. And I want to subtotal the quantity, and of course you wouldn't subtotal unit cost. That would be foolish. But you could go and say what you want to subtotal. You wouldn't subtotal a margin, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Makes 0 sense, by the way. Anyway, if we click OK now, it'll rearrange the report, right, to be grouped the way I wanted it to be grouped, right? So now it's by DCS first. So everything in the DCS is in here, then by store, of course, by item. It's an item level report. But so you see we're still in, no, we're not. Moving pretty fast here, aren't we? Yeah, so you see store 5 is still in the same grouping under accessories, right? And the same thing is going to happen for each if I collapse that, right, you see all the stores are rowed up underneath that department code. and then it starts a new department code and it starts the stars over again, right? So you can change the grouping. Now, in this case here, I changed the grouping on the fly. I ran the report, changed the grouping. And if I were to close this and rerun it, it would revert back to the way it was saved, right? It would not maintain this structure. If I really wanted to, I could save this right now and make a new report. We'll get there, right? One thing at a time. All right, so could we add a chart to this thing? Yeah, absolutely could add a chart to this thing. So highlighting a report, you have to be the owner. If you're not the owner, you will not see the edit command, okay? If you're not the owner, then just copy it, duplicate it, right? Or change, you could go in the back end and take ownership of it. But I'm gonna say that, you know, if you've got system reports in there, I wouldn't take ownership of those. I would copy them. I would leave the originals there as an example for future reports you might want to build, right? So if I take this one here and go edit and open up this one, and any report, you could copy any report, and then boom, you're the owner, right? So you could do this to anything. Go down and find the place where it says set up a chart, right? And hit the plus sign, and it says, what do you want to do here? So I'm going to say, let's do something on store here. And let's do a bar on store by extended cost. And let's do another one. Ooh, we're having fun now, right? On a store, we're going to do a pie by store by extended cost. And then let's do a one on department that's maybe a bar and departments, and sure, extended cost. We'll keep the theme running, right? And you know what's next, right? I mean, and let's scroll down to the bottom here, and it clicks the save button. Okay, let's go back to there. And now, can you, at a glance now, can you tell that this report here has a chart? Yeah, there's a chart icon on the left, right? So it pops up and says, hey, this thing's got charts, right? So let's run it unattended and see if it worked. They've had some issues with their charts off and on. Like they stopped working and they started working again. Right, so I don't see a chart, right? But there's three tabs at the top. We've got data, summary, and charts, right? So we're on the data tab. Let's go to the charts tab. And there is the two charts I asked for, right? Let's zoom out a little bit, right? Make it a little easier to see what's going on. So by store on top, we've got the bar chart on the left and the penetration or pie chart on the right by store. And then the bottom is by master department, right? So not by DCS, because that tends to make very slim, narrow slices of pie, if you know what I'm saying. You can't evaluate like items or styles by a pie chart. It's the slices get to be so narrow they're stupid, right? But master department is good, right? Master department is nice. I mean, because you look over here and see that 34% of your business is this FOO here, right? I think that is footwear, by the way, not food. I don't know what miscellaneous is. I don't know what pan is either, but you know, if this was my data, I would understand this data better, right? So it's nice to see, you know, the volume on the left and the penetration on the right. That's a pretty slick, cool functionality, right? So yeah, you know, with charts, be careful. I mean, people create charts for the sake of creating charts. You really want to pick and choose. Like this is fairly meaningful for me. If I'm looking at my on-hand, this is meaningful. I like seeing it by store and I like seeing it by master department or category. I think that is valuable, but you can make really dumb charts is what I'm saying. Okay, so be careful with that, right? Um, Pivot. What the heck is a summary pivot? Okay, so let's go back to data. And in data, let's see here. We're zoomed in a bit, aren't we? Well, let's say we're going to go to footwear. All right, that kind of works for me. All right, and so we're filtered down. Now, this still could be quite a bit of data. Let's see here. Yeah, it probably is too much data. So let's go. All right, so now we're down to one vendor, still a fair amount of data, but let's try it, right? So we've got a filter imposed on something. Let's go to this middle tab, this summary tab. And the summary tab was terribly confusing to me in the beginning. And again, though, if you see a gear, click the gear. Or if you don't click the gear, you're not going to get there. Okay, so in here, I could then drag these fields down and decide what I'm putting where, right? So I'm going to put, if I can get my mouse to cooperate, I'm going to put that down there like that. I'm going to say this goes here and say quantity goes there. Let's see what the heck happens here, right? I don't want you to blow up with everybody watching, right? Now, if you throw too much data at this pivot table, it will choke and die. Like if you try to put the entire inventory for 9 stores in there for all departments, all vendors, it will choke and die. Yes. This looks like it's not going to choke and die, but I don't know if we want to wait for it either, you know. I might need to go back and filter it for something smaller. Now, I don't know how many of you guys out there know what a pivot table is in Excel. Many buyers are very familiar with pivot tables. Not everybody is. But pivot table is a very powerful tool in Excel, and that's what this is basically, a pivot table. It's just built into the report so you don't have to export to Excel. Of course, you can export to Excel. Everything can export to Excel in Crunch or in Retail Pro 9 or 8. You can always get things in Excel pretty fast, pretty easy. Yeah, do I have the patience? Probably not. And for that matter, how do I break out of a report? How do I break out or how do I reset Crunch if I'm in Crunch and it's going on too long? And unresponsive. Warning, warning, Will Robinson, danger. Yeah, I put too much data in, so I could continue to wait. It probably will get done, but we're going to exit the page, right? And it's going to say, snap, and we're going to reload. The other way to do that is to use the secret keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-R, right? If I do a Control-Shift-R, it refreshes the page like that and pops it up, right? So let's see if let's see if we go back to, see if I can get a smaller grouping of data to work on that pivot thing, right? So if I go, to this report here, we run it like that. And all right, let's see if we can get something going on that. That's just one style, right? So we'll see if we can get that to fly. Basically, though, it's going to create a grid, right? With the styles on the left and the colors on the left, and then the sizes across the top and the on hand in the middle of the grid, right? That's what it's going to do. If I can get it to fly. Of course, I do this and it works all the time. Then I get on a webinar where I'm recording it and we fall on our face, right? That's Murphy's Law, right? Right. So exporting and emailing and in Privu, that's nice. That's really special. And I copied this out of another document. So special that we have that other document out there too, right? Could just be my VM. This is a VM inside my machine. It doesn't have the memory that my regular computer has. So, all right, yeah, all right, yeah. I'm throwing in the towel. The preview, it actually works pretty well, and I think that my VM is just a little underpowered. It's not, we're not getting there, right? So I apologize for that. It is something that I would definitely play with, though, if you're a pivot person. Some people love pivots and they use the heck out of them. And if you're not a pivot person, don't waste your time. If it doesn't work for you, it's probably not gonna, right? All right. So can I run one of these reports and can we export it out? So we'll pick a small report. We'll click go. Again, don't be afraid to share if you have questions or anything at all. I don't see anybody asking anything yet in the chat. Wait a second, there's a Q&A thing here. Let's see what's in there. Just try to make demos larger or zoom in. Okay, yeah, can do. Yeah, what's DCS? DCS is department class subclass. So if I have a DCS, like I would have a men's department, and in my men's department, I would have a class of tops or bottoms. And then in the tops class, I might have polos and tees and woven shirts and tank tops, probably, maybe. I don't really wear tank tops, but the DCS is the category structure that we track our merchandise in. So good question, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate that. And zooming, yes, I can zoom in. Now, anybody who's on a browser can zoom in and out, right, with holding the control key and using the roller on the mouse, right? And yes, sometimes I need to zoom out to see the buttons and click them, and sometimes I need to zoom in because damn, it's hard to see, right? Okay. Really appreciate that, by the way. Thanks. And anybody else has questions or answers or chats, please feel free to throw them in, right? At the top here, there's a button that says export, right? So if we click export, we can say, do we want this CSV? Do we want it XLSX? Or do we want it PDF, right? So I don't have Excel on my VM. I have it on my computer, but I don't have it on my VM. But if we go to PDF here, this is a very small report, right? So it should be okay portrait, right? I don't really have much in the way of filter criteria, so I really don't need this. And I don't need this here, right? I don't think I need to fit it to page because it's pretty narrow. We are not in the United Kingdom. I'm pretty sure that A4 is the wrong paper size. So I'm going to go to letter size paper. And I'm going to say OK and see what the heck happens, right? And up here at the top, we get a little insert in our browser that says we can go to the folder or we could just open it up. I'm just going to open it and see what it looks like. And that is the report. Yeah, that's correct. That is the report. So yeah, we could send it out to anything we want. Now, let's point out something that's awkward that they're working on. By the way, we've already reported it and they're trying to fix it, but I'm going to point it out since it's here and it's annoying. That department is not very big. I'm just going to say that's 3 characters, right? I think we can all see that. But yet it's being allotted a tremendous amount of space here between these numbers over here and this over here, right? Somehow this here, this date timestamp is being interpreted as being part of that data set and is causing it to widen. When you turn on show the complete filter, it widens it further. and we've asked them, because it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the department name. Like the report name doesn't seem to be a part of this. This can be really small, and if this is large, it seems to be governed by that right there. So we've asked them to to turn that off and make that go away, right? Because it's weird. So if we go and we get a BHD sales report, okay, so we take this report here and we run this report here with a filter, and we say that we want to see some data. Now, when it comes to date ranges and filtering, and maybe this is next on our list, maybe it's not, but there's two ways we can filter, right? So I'm just going to say, here's my sold date filter, right? So I could do this, right? I could pick my own date range, right? Or I could use a predefined dynamic date range, like last 365 days, last 30 days, month to date, this month, same thing, last week, today, year to date, right? So these get predefined, right? So YTD equals a date type, and it equals this year. That's the definition. Then we save that, and then it becomes something in my drop-down menu here, right? So for this example, I'm going to go filter something because this data is extremely old. So we're just going to go back to like 2002 and do something like November. And again, we have to click the little plus sign. We can close our little definition thing there and click OK. All right, so there is a report showing the departments, master department only, and the penetration to the total, right? So this is 14% of, so in other words, 114,000 is 14% of almost 800,000. That sounds about right, actually, right? 276,000 is 34, almost 35% of 800,000, right? So if we export this out to PDF and we say we'll probably want to go like that and like that. And we're going to leave this turned on, right? And we're going to say, okay, and see what that looks like. And you see what happened now. I'm going to zoom in on this because, yeah, that is really painfully small, right? Now you can see what I'm talking about with that filter, how it widens that first column in an unnatural way. And again, it's already been reported. They've already sent it up the hill, and actually they sent it to the crunch people, which are not up the street. Retail Pro is actually like less than 10 miles from our office here. So they're up in Folsom, and we're in Rancho Cordova, just down the hill. But Slicer, the people that program Crunch are not. So we send it to them, they send it up to Slicer, and then I don't know, it falls into the black hole, and we don't know when it's going to get fixed. But I know that it's been reported and accepted. So if that makes sense to everybody, right? So, you know, if you export this to Excel, it won't matter. This width thing here goes away in Excel, right? Because Excel just does what it wants anyway. Certainly CSV would be the same, right? Now, when you ask it to fit the page, which I did, you see it always seems to have a very large margin on the right-hand side. I mean, it fits the page, but sometimes it makes the font really small, right? So just be aware of that. Okay, so export, we did this. Email from preview. Yeah, we can email anything, right? So if we're here looking at the report, there's an email button right there. You just click email and say who you're going to send it to, right? And how you're going to send it out, right? Now, this only works if you have your email config in the preferences, and we will peek at that towards the end. We'll look at the preferences and make sure we know where that is. But you know, it's putting in your SMTP server and normal email stuff. If you're, oh yeah, we want to click OK, did we? All right, let that go for a second. Pop back out here. Copy report versus save as, right? Yeah, that's kind of an important distinction, right? So I just ran this, and if I filtered this here, if I said filter this by, and I got nothing. I don't know, this one I didn't put the vendor code in here, did I? So if I said filter it by workstation 1, right? I don't even know if that works, but we'll find out, right? Okay, it apparently does work. So I could now, right here, I could say save this as, and I could say a new name here, right? And I could then pick an existing group or a new group, right? And I could click that. And if I clicked that and clicked OK, it would actually add the words new group to my group list and this report here to my report list. So if we have an existing report and we run it for a certain set of data over and over again, and we want to streamline that process, right? We could just, once we run it, we could just do a save as right here, and it would save all the filters and everything. So if I say, all right, let's try it. Let's go new group. Let's click OK. It says successful. So if I now go over here and say new, I see new name and it's in the new group, right? So there's should be a new group in here. There it is right there, new group, and it's right there. And notice that this report is carrying the little funnel, right? The icon to the left of the little screw and wrench thing there is a funnel, meaning there's a filter that's been applied to this, right? So of course, if we don't like this, we could just also just say, hey, look, I'm done with that. I don't need that anymore. Go away, which just deleted the report and it deleted the group because the only thing holding the group in there was, in fact, that report, right? Everybody good with that? Any other questions? No questions I see yet. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if it's not, or if you have questions, right? So, right, yeah, yeah, my typing skills leave a lot to be desired, right? Outputs versus and workspace, right? So what are those things, right? So here I am looking at my report list, right? Now, that report I just exported a minute ago, I lost it. I don't have the copy. I want another copy. If I go to outputs, I can see everything that I sent out. If I want another copy, I just click on it and I get another copy. Now, the last report I ran is in workspace. It's still here. Like it's there. We ran it. It's there. It's sitting there. And it's going to be there until I run another report, right? So I could go back and look at other reports. If I don't see what I want, and I say, yeah, that's what I wanted. I could just go back and it's still there until it's a very shallow sort of backup. It keeps whatever you land last in there. And then you can go back and play with it more if you want, right? All right, so the dashboard. Ooh, the dashboard, right? What is the dashboard? The dashboard, let's go back to our inventory one, the one that we had some reports. Do we have one of these had, all owners, no filter, right? Good. Inventory, there we go, by item. So if we run this again, right, this one is the one that has the cool charts, right? Let's say I like those charts and I want those charts to be in the dashboard, right? So we don't have a dashboard, so it's kind of angry at me. So if I go in here and I say, I'd like this here to be in slot number 1. Okay. And I want this to be in slot number 2. And I want this one to be in not going to 3, going to 4. And this one I'm going to go to 5. You guys figure out why yet? Okay, now let's go to the dashboard. And because 1, 2, 3, 4 is under the other one, right? So if I want to do like my bar charts on the left and my pie charts on the right, then I want to do 1 and 4 and 2 and 5, right? If that makes sense to everybody. Now you got 6 of these for 4 pages, right? So we've got like all this room out here to play with, right? And you can reconfigure them. I did that and I forgot how, but I could go look it up again. But I did reconfigure this one here to be only two graphs, right? Which is kind of nice. I kind of like it better, to be honest. But that's a dashboard. Now, if you have a dashboard and you sign into reports, it's now going to start on the dashboard, right? because that makes sense. Now, a report in the dashboard will not by itself refresh, right? You have to schedule the report to be refreshed every morning to keep the data fresh. Or you could also, when you come in here, if you want to refresh it, just click, it runs. And then it's refreshed. And since all four of those dashboards are on this one report, clicking on any one of those refreshes all four, right? So you could refresh it anytime that fast, right? Or schedule the report to run and automatically refresh every morning, say. I mean, if you've got multiple stores and you're looking on hand, an hour is not going to be a big deal, right? A day, yeah, starts to add up, but 1 hour isn't going to be the end all, be all, end all. If it's refreshed every morning, you're probably very, very close. So that's the dashboard. And again, be careful what you put in there. Put in really useful things that give you high-level guidance, right? Is kind of where you want to be on that one. Let's go back here and see scheduling. So scheduling report. How do we schedule a report, right? So if we wanted that report to update itself, like in a schedule every morning, we would first find the report, highlight the report. And of course, with a sales report, we would have to have a filter for a date range, right? So one way to phrase that is that in order to schedule a report, it has to be able to run unattended, right? You have to have all your filter criteria in there. Otherwise, you can't run it at 6 in the morning because you're not going to be here at 6 in the morning to type something in, right? So if we highlight the report, though, we got the clock, we click the clock, we say, okay, we want to run this daily. You could run it every 15 minutes, and you could email yourself every 15 minutes, but I would recommend not spamming yourself. But I could run this at 6 in the morning, right? I could say run every morning at 6 o'clock, CSV, PDF, whatever, email or don't email, and then I could just click save, and that starts running at that time every morning. So now I had a client who is actually brilliant. She's amazing. And she started building her own reports in simple mode, which she's better in simple mode than I am. And she scheduled them all to run every 15 minutes because she really wanted to be up on her data, and it filled her hard drive up. So we fixed that. We changed the schedule to not be every 15 minutes and deleted a lot of that stuff. And her computer's back, and she's up and running, and she's doing great again. But yeah, I would recommend not doing the every 15-minute thing. It might be excessive, but in 9 series to schedule a report to be emailed was a lot. I mean, we wrote a script and we showed you how to use it and we put it in there. Here, you could do it. You don't need me. You don't need a tech. You just go in and pick the report, click schedule, and say how you want to schedule it and how you want to deliver it, right? Save it. That's it. And then it shows up like this. Here's one that I scheduled from before, right? Okay. All right, so report creation modes. So there are 3 report creation modes. So if we go back to reports, you see the little plus sign here that lets us create a report. Now, I think simple mode is pretty cool and is definitely something you guys could use. Like I said, I have a client back in Missouri who is just outstanding, and she has gone crazy with it, and she's done amazing stuff. It, for the most part, is at the item level. When you're creating a simple report, it seems to be limited that I've seen to the items. But it can be run on pretty much anything you want. So let's play with making a report in simple mode, right? So let's click create and say we're going to go into simple mode. And I think they did a pretty good job on this. So let's say out of the gate here, I want to see item descriptions of things that sold. Okay. So I'm going to say category-wise here. Let's go into inventory, select some columns. Okay, let's select, my DCS. Okay, so I'm going to get my DCS code, and I'm going to call that DCS. Not terribly surprising. And then I'm going to get my description 1, and I'm going to call that description 1. So you get to rename them so they don't have their native names. They have whatever column header you want. And I would then get the attribute and maybe the description 2 and the size. I'm just going to skip ahead to getting the ALU here, right? And we're going to call that ALU. Now I've got my descriptive component right down to the item, but what I want to see is sales data. So I'm going to switch this mode to sales mode, right? And now I'm going to get the quantity sold or sold quantity, right? So we're going to go in and say, all right, let's try. Okay, document. I don't think that's it though. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So yeah, I guess it is document sold quantity. All right, so let's go with that, and let's call that quantity because document sold quantity is it's a lot, right? Now I'd like to see the price that it's sold for, right? So document item price. Okay. All right. Good. We're going to call that price. And now, if I sold 3 of these at $50, I'd like to see the extended, right? The 150, right? 3 times 50 is 150, right? So, is there an extended field? There is not, by the way. There is no extended price field. So to get the extended, we would have to go in and say, look, I want that. Then we would have to put the multiplier in there, the little asterisk, right? Press enter, it gets absorbed. We then go and put in price. We find the document item price, and that gets absorbed. And we then say quantity times price is, so we say extended price, right? But that's a really, really simple report, right? But you could build your own reports here if you wanted to. And I've got way too much data. I should probably have filtered this down, but I didn't. But you see it's working, right? I mean, so now what's going on here with the numbers? They don't look right, do they? And since we're here, we're going to have to fix that, right? So first off, quantities should not have decimals. And so that's this button right here, field settings, right? If we're in build mode, we click on field settings and we say, hey, guys, this is an integer, not a decimal. And the extended price was being rounded in a very weird way because it was set to integer and it should be a decimal, right? So we're going to say okay and see if that fixes things a bit. Right, so 1 times 377 is in fact 377, not 4. 3 times 397 is 1191. Okay, that looks better, right? So, and we could continue and make this bigger, but you see that the functionality exists here. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to use. It's pretty intuitive, actually. Now, the advanced mode, the next layer, shall we say, I'm not as fond of this one, but I can show it to you, and you can be your own judge, right? In this one here, you have to know the table structure. So you'd have to know how to join data here. And if you know how to join data, why aren't you just using expert mode? I mean, I'm just going to say, but all right, so real quick here without going too crazy into SQL land, right? If I was to just draw you a picture here, right? We've got an inventory file, right? That's got every item and every description, right? Boom, there's a big inventory file, right? That's our inventory file. And then we have a file that's holding our receipts, right? That we make. So every one of these is a receipt. But a receipt can have many items, right? So we're going to have another table that says, here's our receipt items, right? So we could have 3 items in here that all relate. All 3 of these here tie back to one transaction, but each of these also tie back to its native description and inventory. It's a relational database, right? So we'd have to be able to say, from the, let's see if can I just type it in? Yeah, from the document table, that's my receipt table. What columns do I want? Do I want the receipt number? Let's see, can I type in that one? Let's see. All right, so doc number, that's the receipt number right there. So if I wanted the receipt number in this, I'd have to know how to find it, right? If I then wanted to go, and I would probably call it, receipt number, not doc number. And if I wanted to get like some item level data to see, then I have to go to the document item table, right? And now I could see, how many I sold, what the description of what I sold was, right? Now, ultimately, I'm going to have to join these. So I'm going to have to go down to this and do the conditions, right? And I have to say what equals what, right? Like I'm going to have to say document, there's a document SID, and in the item table that I'm in right now would be document item doc SID, I believe. There it is. So that field there would be equal to that field right there, and it would be document, would just be document SID. So it'd be way down here. We're on the O's. That's misleading. Right. So that. So the document item dot doc SID field would be equal to the doc SID field. That's the join, right? So you see what I mean, though, about this. If you already know that, then why aren't you just writing SQL, right? I mean, it's not that hard. Select these fields from these tables where these conditions are true, right? So I don't write in this mode much. I do write in expert mode. And in expert mode, you click open the expert mode and click OK, and you get a place to put your query in. Now, this is a full-on query, so regular SQL environment, right? So if I just wanted to check something, I just want to see what the name of that column is in that table, I could say, okay, select everything, asterisk. Okay, come on. Am I in the wrong place? Yes, I am. Select asterisk, right? Asterisk from, now the database is called RPS. So RPS dot document, right? So show me everything in the document table, right? That's what that says, right? And so I could just click go, and it'll just go get everything in the document table, and it'll be enormous and very ugly presentation of everything in the document table, right? Now, there are all kinds of things in the document table that we don't care about, like the SID, the system ID is the master key, right? So we don't typically care to see like the key or the SID, if you know what I mean. There's things in here we don't want to see. So when you build a query, it's usually a little bit more controlled, but there you go. You see, there's things in here like here's the SID, and it's being interpreted incorrectly. They're putting commas in it because they think it's a number. It's not a number, right? So, but there's important things in here like status 4 means the transaction was completed, right? Or these here weren't completed. These receipts weren't completed. This one was, right? So there's different flags in here that tell us what's going on. And if I hit the right arrow, you see there's just a ton of stuff in here. I don't think we want to take the time to even look at it all because it's just way too much. That's just the receipt table, right? So there's a receipt item table. We're not going to go look at that. We could back up and say that, with SQL, especially with, these AI chats out here, right? You can have them do tricks for you, right? So you could go get some information, edit, get the table structure, get the query. You could take any report, copy it, and if you copied it, you could then open it up and you could, you could go find things in there, right? So like here, if I click edit, it opens up. I could open up the query. I could find the query that's in here. I could do a select all. I could copy that and I could drop that into a chat and ask the chat to modify it to do something. Now, my experience with the chats are they're like a 2-year-old because they really are. They're really like a 2-year-old. They're brilliant, but they don't know the table structure. They don't know your goal. I wrote a query this morning and threw it in the chat, said evaluate this, and it gave me a bunch of things wrong with it. Then I told that what I was trying to do with the thing, and he said, "Oh, well, then it's perfect." I'm like, "Oh, all right then. What do you really think about it?" So you could take one of these things and go put it in there, and like this one here is kind of what I did with this one. This one here, this query, basically takes your current on hand and then takes a period date. And the period date, you see the period date here, is not just sales, it's sales, receiving, and it's adjustments. And it does the math. So it says your current on hand was whatever your current on hand is, adding back the sales, taking out the receiving, and then taking out the adjustments. What was the on hand last year at the same time for that same store or department or whatever you're running it on, right? So, I mean, I would toy with the SQL because there's a lot of resources today that you have, and certainly I'm one of them. If you have a report that you want to have written, you could ask me to write it. I'm far less expensive probably than other report writers because you just pay our regular tech rate, and I probably could get done in typically a half an hour. I wrote a report this morning that one of our clients wanted to know how long things have been out of stock. So show me things that are zero that sold recently and when they last sold. What's the last sold date of that item? And we looked at one, and he liked the report, and it had been out of stock since the 24th. Today's 28th, so it'd been out of stock 4 days, right? And turned he had the item on order and it was due in today, so he was pretty pleased with the report and how his system is running. But there's a lot of things we can do in here, right? This is a one I wrote in 9 series, and then I rewrote it here in Crunchland, right? That takes a vendor in this case. It shows you things that are 6 months old, right? And their cost 12 months old, 18 months old, 24 months old, and greater than. And most of this data in this data set here is so old that it's almost all more than 2 years old, right? But it spreads out and shows you how old your stuff is sort of by columns, which is a nice view. I'm not going to lie, that's a nice view. And here it'll then tell you how old it is in days, right? So that is, 1,100 days is more than 2 years old. 2 years old is 365 twice, right? So that's definitely more than 2 years old, right? So, and of course, it shows you if it's never sold too. That's also. But these are just some reports I've played with that I've done. Okay, so real quick, then we should continue on down the path because we could get on the report rabbit hole deep, right? So let's hop over. Excuse me. Hop over to the other side real quick, and then we can wrap this up. And again, if anybody has any questions, don't be shy. And I appreciate the questions we've got so far. So let's minimize that. Let's log out, sign out of this completely, and go over to the other side, the dark side. The preference side is actually the more appropriate thing. So over here we've got this is where we would enter new users. Now, lead users are limited to the number of licenses we own. We assign a license to a particular login, and then anybody could use the login, but it can only be used once. So if somebody's using it, somebody else signs in, that bumps the other user, right? So we can set up roles, and we can assign those roles to users, right? You get one free Crunch license with every inventory you own. So if you have 3 stores, you get 3 automatically. Most people have found, especially with the VPN and everybody being on the same, essentially virtually private network, that they end up deploying all their licenses at the main office. Then they just create a shortcut that points over the VPN to the main office database as opposed to running it at the store level. But you can do it either way. So you could create a role. Then when you go to access control, you could be in role mode or user mode. And then you click on that and you can decide what they can do, right? So can this person create reports in expert mode? Can they create a report? Can they edit reports? Can they duplicate reports? Can they schedule reports, right? Can they create runtime filters? So there's a lot of control over what they can do. You can also then go into the report tab and decide which reports are blocked. They can't run that disbursement report. So to do that, you would just drag it over to the other side. See that? You can drag things over if you can get the mouse to cooperate correctly. All right, I'm not sure I care about that a great deal, but you can limit access to fields, you can limit access to tables, you can, so. Nice. All right, so the database should be connected. This says when they install Crunch, this will already be done. You have to put the server name in here and then save it, and it connects, and that's all there is there. Image, you can have images, and you've got to tell it where your images are, and then you could actually print reports with images. I played with it. I wasn't terribly excited with it. Makes the reports really long because it makes each item about an inch tall in the report, right? But I could see where there are definitely some clients we have that would love to do that. This export location is brand new. They just put that in the current version, and we should peek at that version so we all know what we're on, right? So this is this is 1502. All right, so we could connect this to an FTP site, and we could then push things to the FTP site, right, automatically. So if you were having, like if you had an integration or an agreement with locally.com and you pushed up, the store number, the UPC, and the quantity on hand in a simple CSV file up to their FTP site, then they would then digest that information into their system, and then if somebody was searching for that item and they could see that you have it on hand, they would redirect, right, the customer to you in that area. Email, here's your email config, right? And they just added OAuth, which is the new Microsoft method of confirming that your identity, right? SMTP is still there, so smtp.gmail.com at port 587, right, with your user and passwords would also get you in, right? With Gmail, you have to have an application password, right? You have to have a specific password you have to turn on two-factor authentication and then generate an app password. Field mapping, right? So you can change the names of these if you want to. That's all this is, and you've got all your areas here. Field value maps. This is indexing. So this is very important. So if you haven't done this, you need to. If I go down to DCS, for instance, you can see my DCS codes are in there, right? My DCS codes are in there because I clicked the gear and I checked off DCS code, right? So I want this one checked off for sure. Maybe I want my department name is indexed. Maybe I don't. Maybe I filter by them. Maybe most people don't actually. So, right. Now, there's a limit for how many you can have in the index. So you got to be a little bit careful. Now, department codes exist in the department code table, right? For sure. Absolutely, right? They also exist in the document item table, right? So it could be that I'm running a report, and in that report, it's using the document item DCS code instead of the department DCS code, right? So what's the difference, right? Well, in inventory, every item has a department, right? But that's real time. That's on hand. That's live data, right? That's in inventory. Now, if I put an item in inventory and I sell it, that department code gets transferred to the document item table as a history element, right? So if I'm reading the document item DCS code, I'm reading the way it was when it's sold versus the way it is right now. So if I sold an item in one department, then I changed the department, and I sold it again, it would now exist in two departments, right? So if I read the document item table in a report, which is my choice, then I see it breaks out into two different departments, and I get two different numbers for the same item, right? Because I put it in two different departments. It's on me, right? So we can choose to link it to the one in inventory, which is always going to show you one number, right? Or we could choose to link it to the item one. And there are reasons why I would do both. Mostly probably I'm going to inventory, but there are times when I need to see the way it was when it sold, right? So for me, departments, vendors, stores are the big ones here, right? Those are the ones that really give you a bang for your buck, right? Like if I have multiple stores, I definitely want my store numbers and my store codes all indexed in here, right? So I got store name in here and I've got store number in here, but I don't have store code in here. And I might actually benefit more from a store code than store name. You follow? Like I'm not really sure I'm ever going to search by the name, but I very well might. Like if I have a store in SAC, it's going to be SAC, the code. If it's in San Francisco, it's going to say SF, right? If it's in Auburn, it's going to say AUB, right? Or in this case, they're just going to leave it as numbers. All right. So the point is that this is a very powerful tool. If you index these, then on the other side, we'll go back and look at that in a second. It'll index for you. So under maintenance, this is importing, exporting. So I could import a new report from someone. I could export a report. I could say, I really want to give this report to my friend. So I could export this out, right? And there it is, exported as a KRR file. Then I could import that KRR file into another installation, right? Updates. This is where we're supposed to get updates, and there is an update. Wow, they turned that off for such a long time. But I have an update. I might do that update later. I won't do it on the webinar. All right, so I'm going to log out again real quick, sign out, and I'm going to go back to the report side. We're just going to re-examine that that indexing thing, right? So if I'm looking for a report that says show me stores, so if I say, oh, what do I got here? Anything good? Store sales, a pretty basic report, right? So if I say run this with a filter, open my filter, and I say store code, and we get nothing. Nice. So this one doesn't work. Nice, special. Let's see if we can find one that works. Sometimes they don't do that. I'm not sure why. Now, actually, I should pause on that. If you're here and you have a situation where your indexing is not working, right? But you know the store number you want, you could just go like this, right? And then click on it, and it would insert that, and you could add that. Like you could still do it if you knew what you were looking for, I guess is what I'm saying. Don't be thrown off by that. Yeah, there we go. This one's working fine. This is the one I built. And I don't know if the code's cleaner or not. I don't know why it's working. But here, if I wanted to run this for, hypothetically, store 1, store 5, and store 8, I could just go like that, and like that, and like that, right? And so you see, I could write that myself, but I'd rather click it and have it write it, right? It's just a lot easier. That's indexing right there, working, apparently. So, what if I had to, no, my head's reeling around on that, right? So I'm wondering if I had to do that. If I was running it from here and I went like that, could I just go, okay, store code 001, comma, 005, comma, 008, no spaces ever in that field, right? So could I do that? Yeah, and it wrote the same phrase, store code in one of those, right? So you could still do it if you knew what you were doing. If you knew your store codes, you can still do it. And I'm not sure why some of the reports don't index right correctly. All right, so I think that brings us through through the whole process. Oh, I will mention that that tool right there, not this one, on any server, on any Retail Pro server, okay, if I open up the server drive and I go into the Oracle table, the Oracle place, and I go into this ODS 12 CR here. If I go into the Oracle, so this is the client version, that's the server version, right? If I go into this weird folder, I don't really care the rest of the stuff, but there is an SQL developer folder. And you could pull a shortcut up and create a shortcut for that. I already have one. And if you open that, it's going to look very much like this. You'll have to create a connection. You just click the plus sign, and in the plus sign, you give it a name. The report user is the user, and report is the password, REPORT. And it's typically, it could be a basic, but it's typically a TNS, and it's RPro ODS. And if we had a name here, we could now save that. I'm not going to save it. I already have it saved, right? So then in here, you can use this little thing at the top to open up new windows. And so a minute ago, we did select everything from RPS.document, right? And it took a minute for Crunch to render that, right? And so this does the same thing, but a whole lot faster. And this does much better troubleshooting, right? That's what this does a really good job on. Now, earlier, I think I mentioned, and I'm going to see if I can point it out here. Okay, right here, if you put an equals dash equals in the code around a field like this, that is a Crunch specific or an application specific filter. This is not SQL. Do you see the red line right there? There's a red line in here. The SQL developer is identifying that as faulty code, right? So if I run this, and it looks pretty, the report down here looks great, right? But if I run it now, it's going to tell me that I'm missing an expression. And it's going to say on line 47, column 5, right? And so down here in the bottom right corner, you see that I am on line 47. So this is, okay, that's weird. Scrolling a bit. This is line 47, right? And now I'm on line 47, column 12. That's where the SB, right there when the S is, right? So column 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there, it says there's an error. Well, that's because this is not SQL. This is Crunch only code, right? So if I put 2 dashes in front of that, that makes it a programmer's remark, and it's ignored, right? So if I remark that out and then rerun it, it runs fine because that's regular SQL, right? Now, I don't know how deep you want to go into the land of SQL, but SQL is typically fairly simple in that if you see right here, this has got a nested select statement, but let's just deal with the one thing, the select statement. So right here, select these fields from these tables down here, right? These tables, and interjoin them or left outer join them on certain fields, and then group by some other stuff down here, right? So if I just highlight that and run that, this is the inner query right here. That's what I'm asking for, right? And you can have a what's called a nested select statement. And so the reason, and this is what originally had this, by the way, this query had multiple nested select statements, and it was doing 2 or 3 things, and I stripped it down to just one function for a project I did this morning. So I'm then pulling from this table here, which is in fact, this ends right there, and that's the name I gave it, right? So I'm just pulling those fields from this nested select statement up to the top value. There's advantages to do that, which we could get into more if we had more time, but this isn't really an SQL writing workshop, is it? So, but like I said, you could take the code from an existing report, copy it into here, copy it into a chat, have the chat modify it, dump it back in here, test it, make sure that if it has application-specific filtering like that, that you rem it out or mark it out, put 2 dashes, and when you bring it back to Crunch and drop it into a report, you got to remember to take these off, because if you have a remark or 2 dashes in front of it, then that's been remarked. It's not going to work. The filter won't work. It'll show up. It'll look like it's working, but it won't actually work, right? So we got to be got to be a little bit careful about that. And honestly, you could shoot that over to me and or get an appointment. I could help with that kind of stuff if you're interested. I don't know. A lot of people aren't. So any other questions before we all turn into a pumpkin here? I don't see any other chats or any other questions. So I'm going to say, I guess, thank you, so much for joining. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's pretty dry material, but I try to keep it lively. And I think Crunch is getting there. I think it's getting to a point where it's a pretty powerful and nice tool. So you guys, if you have questions, my name's Jeff. I'm here at the Big Hairy Dog, and certainly you can schedule time with me and I can write reports for you, or I can help you write reports, or all of the above. So you guys take care. Have a good weekend, and I hopefully will talk to you soon. You're very welcome. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.